launching this workshop series with Amy Aines is such a fitting way to start. I met Amy at the Science Talk conference back in March, and the conversation we had about careers helped to inspire the idea for PAWS. Amy is a communication strategist who has worked in telecom, wireless, tech, and biotech. She is CEO of a consulting firm she founded after a 20-year industry career. Amy is a trainer, speaker, and author of the book Championing Science, who brings the voice of experience and practical how-to advice. After Championing Science was published, Amy changed her career focus. Now her mission is to be a success catalyst for STEM graduates through her lectures and workshops. We are lucky to have her with us to lead the first 3 PAWS workshops. So with that, Amy, the floor is yours.
Thank you. So, what does it take to figure out how to have a fulfilling career? That is the big question. And I know when I ask that question, many of you probably feel a little tension in your stomach and a little bit uneasy because it's a daunting question. It's the what do you want to do with your life question. And I went through this recently with our oldest son. He finished his PhD, had been thinking he wanted to be a professor, and in his 6th year decided that really wasn't the direction he wanted to go in. And it left him completely untethered. He had no idea what he wanted to do. And I imagine several of you are feeling the same way, right? Like, what's next? So I just want you to know that Ethan loves his job. He's getting to use his mapping skills, his knowledge of GIS systems, his critical thinking and writing skills, his research skills. And he's found a role working in the area of climate, doing risk assessment and mitigation work. So I want you to know that you will find your way. Everybody does. We all have different journeys along that way, but I can assure you that you can find a fulfilling career. And thanks to the work that Jessica and her sponsors have enabled, you've got a series of workshops to help you think about things. Start thinking about them now. Begin to really understand what's going to inspire you, what will be fulfilling for you. And that's what I want to zero in on as we work our way through this workshop today. So I am really excited to be here and to have the opportunity to do these first 3 workshops with you. Today, our focus is on fulfilling career transitions. What job, what company? And I want you to mark your calendar so you can be back again on the 28th of September when we're going to get more personal. We're going to do a little bit of excavation. Jessica just got to go on an amazing dig, and it's reminding me that really the process of figuring out what your skills are is a mining process. It's about excavation. And we're going to focus on that so you can figure out how do you talk about who you are and what you do when you try to bring that to employers. And part of what we'll do there is also focus on how do you do that with confidence. Then in the beginning of November, I get to do one of my favorite workshops, which is about teaching you communication strategies that will help you when you go out to interview for jobs, because it's really important for you to be able to learn to tell your story and tell it effectively. And believe it or not, you have an advantage over other people in the job market, but I bet you don't know that you do. But Stephen Chang will help you realize why. He's a hiring manager with a company called Miramis. And I met Stephen recently at a job fair. He's started a number of biotech companies. He's hired his share of graduates into new jobs. And the reason I know you have an advantage is because of this. He said, I can't teach smarts, but I can teach most everything else. Now, we've never met, but I know a little bit about you. And I know that you're super smart. I know you've taken those hard classes in school that a lot of people don't take, and if they try to take, they don't pass. So you're already starting with an advantage. And those of you that have your PhD, that are doing postdocs, you've been able to really refine your research skills, your critical thinking skills, your problem solving skills. Along the way, you've developed other skills you probably don't even identify as skills. And we're going to dig into that in the next workshop. So you start to see you bring tremendous value to industry. And having spent a big portion of my career in industry, I'm sure of that. And I want you to know that because I want you to feel, even if you're overwhelmed by the where do I start question, that you have so much richness to offer. But I want to get a sense of where you are at the moment when you think about the direction for your career. And if you would please put in the chat the number that corresponds to how you answer that question. Do you have a clear idea of the direction you want to take your career? I have a feeling there might be a few threes, but I'm guessing we'll see a lot more ones and twos. So I can see the chat rolling in here. Good. A lot of people with some idea. That's terrific. We're going to talk about ways that you can refine your thinking to help ensure that you are on track with the things that you want to accomplish professionally. Before we jump in, I want to make a couple of important points about every career, because every career has a few things in common. It's about getting your foot in the door, starting somewhere. Internships are a great way to try out something, accomplish something that you can put on your resume. Every career has to start somewhere. And if it's not the first move you make that you love, it's okay to change. And many of us feel like we have to have it mapped out. We have to have really thought through where we want to take our career. But I want to remind you that a big part of career is what you don't expect. It's the people you meet along the way, like Jessica, who helped me do something that I've really been wanting to do with my career, which is help more young scientists be successful. Because you hold the key to solving a lot of problems in the world. And I want to make sure you know how to make the most of your abilities and how to communicate in ways that will help you be successful. The other thing about careers is they almost always have ups and downs. My husband was in a situation about 15 years ago because of a reorganization at Lawrence Livermore Lab where he found himself out of a job. He had been running a division. He had 200 plus people working for him. And you might think that that could be pretty devastating. So it's important to be resilient in the face of things that don't feel like they're working for you. So what Roger did at that point was sit back and ask himself, what problems do I want to solve? How can I make an impact with my science abilities? And the area that he chose to focus on 15 years ago was climate. So today, he is the chief scientist of the energy program at Lawrence Livermore Lab. His teams are working on climate technologies, ways to take carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere. They are hiring, so if any of you have an interest in those areas, I know someone who would love to see your resume, so please reach out to me and I will connect you. But most important, I want you to remember that even if it doesn't look like your career is going where you want it to, your career will evolve as often as you choose. It's up to you. And in the old days, leaving jobs, if you didn't spend several years there, didn't look good on your resume, now it's just a sign that you're ambitious and that you want to find the right kind of way to make an impact with your work. And I've certainly evolved my career. You heard a little bit from Jessica, but I want to give you just a couple of other insights into why I'm here, why I'm doing this, why me. And in the course of my first 20 years working in corporations, I've always been in the orbit of scientists and engineers and technologists, helping them more effectively communicate. But I also got to teach a course on careers because AirTouch, the company I worked for, did a lot of work to help people grow professionally. And when you pick a company, you want to find one that wants to help you be successful. That's part of finding your way to a fulfilling career. In my second 20 years, 20 plus now, of consulting, I've been in and out of a lot of industries. I do a lot of work with HR organizations. I've helped companies think about what's known as the employer brand. That is, how do you show up in the marketplace to attract top talent? People are looking for super smart, capable people like you. Companies need you. And they spend time and effort creating strategies to attract you. I know how all of that works. I know how the interviewing process works. And over the course of those 20 years, I've gotten a glimpse of a lot of roles and jobs that I'll speak about a little bit later. And the key thing for me now, when I think about career fulfillment, what's most inspiring and motivating to me is helping other people succeed, helping them learn some things, get up the learning curve quickly. So I'm really delighted that I get a chance to share all that with you. And my motto has always been that words matter. And one of the things you will learn, especially if you're here through these first 3 workshops with me, is about the importance of having a message, being really clear about what you want someone to think and feel and do after they listen to you. And you can appreciate how that plays into getting hired by a company, right? You want to send a very strong message when you're in the interview process. So words matter and they drive results. And I look forward to helping you get the results you want when it comes to career by taking you through these workshops. So let's start with today. 5 topics. We're going to talk a little bit about process because if I've learned anything in my corporate years, having a process and a way of approaching something really helps with feeling less overwhelmed. You know where to start, you know the things you need to accomplish along the way. So we'll talk about that. I think in terms of the preparation process, that's what we'll be spending time on today. I'm also going to introduce you to a host of different kinds of roles because the other unfortunate thing is the what do you want to be when you grow up question has zillions of answers, but most of us are not exposed to all the possibilities. So I want to give you a taste of that. I'm also going to spend time on company culture because I've done a lot of work in that area. And in order to find a fulfilling job and career, you've got to find a culture that fits with who you are. Then we're going to touch on networking and zero in on what I think is the most important strategy for effective networking, and that is informational interviewing. And I'm going to share with you what those conversations need to be like so you know how to go out there and have those kinds of conversations. And last, we're going to spend a little time on finding out salary ranges because let's face it, when you plan for your future, you want to think about where do I want to live? What's it going to take to afford to live there? Do I want to buy a house someday? All those questions require you to think a little bit about your earning potential. So, the career transition preparation process, I see it as 4 pieces. They're interconnected, and sometimes they loop back and you start again with self-discovery and research and outreach and job hunting. And I want to step through these all in a little bit more detail for you. I want to introduce you to Sonali Majumdar. She runs the PhD Plus program out of the University of Virginia. I'm collaborating with Sonali and her team on developing a situational communications course for their graduates. And she recently wrote an article that is in the Inside Higher Ed publication. And that brings me to something important I want to make sure to tell you now, and that is this. We've put together a set of worksheets and handouts that correspond with all of the key things I'm talking about today, and also a series of pages that contain resources. So you'll be able to get links to resources that will deepen your knowledge and understanding of some of the things I'll touch on today. Sonali's article is one of the things that I highly recommend you read, and it's in the materials that you will get a link to at the end of this meeting and will also be posted up on the Nexus site. So we want to make sure you have access to this material so you can come back to it because many of you aren't ready to dive in, but at least you know you've been exposed to this and you can return to it when the time is right for you. So one of the things that Sonali talked about in her article was about self-knowledge and how it involves understanding your relationship to the work that you do, your civic responsibility, and your picture of the future, what you want to create for yourself. When I think about her message here, it's about impact and it's about fulfillment. So figuring out what that means for you is really key to figuring out how to have a fulfilling career. And I want to step you through 3 things she talks about in her article that have to do with the first part of the process, the self-discovery part. And I also want to invite you to post questions at any point along the way in the chat. I have a lot to cover, so I'm not going to stop very often to ask if people have questions. So my promise is this: if I don't address your question, I will be happy to make sure we publish something on Nexus that does. So if questions pop to mind, jot them down, put them in the chat, and we will circle back and ensure that we satisfy your curiosity. So self-discovery, it starts with looking back, taking stock of where you've been in your educational and professional journey and in your life overall, because the things we've done that have been our hobbies are also important in this self-discovery process. And I'd like to ask you to stop and reflect on these two questions. Let's do a little bit of retrospection. What are you most proud of, and what have you worked really hard to achieve? Let me give you a minute to think about those things. And if you're so inclined to post them and share them in the chat, that would be great. If anybody wants to take a minute and comment about that, we'll invite you to do that as well. You can raise your hand and Jessica can call on you, but think about that. What's made you proud? And what's been a big accomplishment that you worked hard for? Looks like people are keeping that to themselves. Are you seeing any comments, Jessica?
Well, one just came in. Oh, a couple.
Great. You want to read a few of them out to the group?
Sure. I see that Daniel says finishing my PhD doing the research I wanted to do. Very important accomplishment. Congratulations. Laura says inspiring and mentoring the students in writing in science that I was a TA for, finishing my PhD and publishing at least one chapter so far. Also, congratulations on both fronts. Zikin says always worked hard, or always worked as the hardest I can so that I have no regret. I love it.
Great
Suvankar
philosophy.
says, right? Suvankar says to become a geographer, and Keelan, hi Keelan, says standing up to the physics department and changing the way the program treats women and minorities. Ooh, that is a big one.
Awesome. Thank you. Well, I appreciate what you've been doing, and I encourage you to always aim high, always aim to do your best. That's a philosophy that will serve you well. And even throughout your career, as you get feedback about ways to improve, take that as something that's just going to help you become even more capable. But if you start by always aiming high, you'll find that serves you well in your career. The other thing that I want to comment on is the reference to teaching and mentoring. Many of you in your educational pursuits will have those opportunities. And if you find you're really inspired by those kinds of interactions, that opens the possibility to a lot of different kinds of careers. So you can see how the reflection process, looking back, is really key to starting to do that self-discovery. The second thing that Sonali talks about is looking within, really having a conversation with yourself. So, what should that be about? Well, your skills, your interests, and your values. And I want to tell you about a tool. Some of you may have heard of it. It was built for scientists, by scientists, to examine science careers. It's called My IDP, which, as you can see, stands for Individual Development Plan. And in the resource materials you'll get from this course, you will find links to take the My IDP assessments so you can begin to develop a plan. There are also several helpful articles that embellish on the topics covered and how to make the most of this tool. So here's my invitation to you. Before the next workshop, make some time to work through this. Because if you've done that, and you've started to identify your skills, we're going to have a much richer conversation when we get into that excavation and mining process, the dig we're going to do into your skills in our next workshop. So I invite you to spend some time with this. And even if you haven't finished high school yet, because I know there are a couple people here who are in high school, do it now. Just see where it takes you. It doesn't mean you have to commit to anything. It's just a process of exploration. So self-discovery is retrospection, introspection, and the third piece that Sonali talks about is extrapolation. It's the imagining what next as a result of understanding yourself, understanding your skills and your interests and your values. And what you're after is the intersection, right? So if it turns out you love mentoring and you're good at giving coaching and guidance for people, then you ask yourself, in what environment? What kinds of things am I interested in? Maybe you're a musician. Maybe working in a company that deals with acoustics, like Plantronics, that makes headsets. Maybe that's a place where you can be a mentor and be in an organization that deals with something you're interested in. And the other really key piece of this is the values piece. What's important to you? For me, it's always been integrity. And when you play many of the roles I've played in doing public relations for organizations, it's really important to work for leaders who you believe in and who have integrity. And I can tell you that I left a company early in my career because we were so delayed in launching a product. And the story that my management wanted me to tell was not a story I felt comfortable telling. It would have compromised my integrity, and I was not about to do that. So like I said, your career moves are your choice, and being clear about your values is part of what enables you to have a fulfilling career. I'll tell you the other part of that story. The other part of that story is that I was in charge of communications for Pacific Telesis Group, one of the 9 companies that happened as a result of the breakup of Ma Bell, the telephone system. And I'm really dating myself here. This is history for many people. But anyway, I had colleagues across the country. There were 9 people in similar jobs. And I had people say to me, you should have a bigger title, you should be promoted, you should leave. And one of the reasons I chose to stay is my management team had incredible integrity. They didn't tell the Wall Street Journal the day before a big deal that we were acquiring another company. They broke the news according to the disclosure laws. They didn't give a scoop to get the story in the paper. And I value integrity. So I knew that was the place I wanted to stay. So getting clear about your skills, your interests, and your values in that intersection is how you'll have a fulfilling career. So let's talk a little bit about research. And I want to say that you all have an unfair advantage. You do research. That's what you do. So the good news is you have the skills, but you just need to use them in a different way. You need to use them to look into jobs and titles and companies and salaries. But you know how to ask good questions. You know how to keep looking. You know how to find information in ways that I probably don't, because I haven't been trained as a researcher in the same ways that you have. So research is the next part of the preparation process. And then you get to the part that makes some people uncomfortable, especially if you tend to be a little bit on the introverted side. It's the going out into the world and having conversations. But I'm here to tell you that informational interviews are very structured kinds of conversations, and I can teach you how to approach them so you'll know what to do. And when you know what to do, it's a lot easier to go out and do it. Networking is something we'll talk a bit about as well. I don't have a lot of time to dig deep, but I want to give you some key principles around networking. And then when I say exploration, what I mean there is for you to think about which potential career areas interesting to you and immerse yourself. It's about going to a conference, reading the publications that people in that industry read, figuring out who the big thought leaders are and how you can follow them on Twitter or on LinkedIn so that you can start to understand what's going on in the field that you might be interested in working in. So that's what exploration is all about. It's about getting out into the world and seeing what the opportunities are. And the last piece of the preparation process is about getting ready to job hunt. And that's where you have to turn your CV, which is a long list of lots of things you've done, awards you've gotten, funding, accomplishments, you have to turn it into a resume. And we are not spending time on resumes. That's a whole huge topic in and of itself. But I want to make a couple key points. You want to come up with a core resume, but you also want to always tailor your resume to the job you're applying for. You don't want to make the hiring manager have to wade through information that isn't relevant. That's not going to score points in your favor. This is a key communications principle that I want to underscore here. Think about who's listening. Think about what matters to them. Tailor what you say to what they're going to care about. That's a way you show respect. It's a way you don't waste people's time. And it's a very effective way of getting people to notice you and want to have a conversation with you because you've told them why they should. So that's my 30 seconds on resumes because we're not digging into them. But you also need, in preparation for job hunting, to identify your references. Who are those people that are going to tell your story, that are going to sing your praises? And you want to spend some time with them. You want them to know the kinds of jobs you're interviewing for. Each time you get a job offer and they ask for references, you want to go back to your references. You want to let them know, I just had a great interview at this company. Here's the job I'm applying for. Here are some of the key skills they're looking for. I would love to be able to let them get in touch with you. What's the best way to do that? Should I give them your cell phone, your email? What will work for you? Use the opportunity to circle back to your references whenever you're close to being offered a job. And if you know you're getting an offer for a job, it's a really vital time to provide references. The other piece about getting ready for the job hunt is to really think about interviewing. And that's where your communication skills come in. That's where learning how to tell your story, how to tell your value story, because that's what it's all about. An interview is about the employer, not about you. I know that sounds counterintuitive, but it's really more about the employer. It's about what they need. It's about the problem they're trying to solve by hiring you. They've set aside money to pay for someone to come in to do a job. So your orientation towards your interview needs to really reflect that you understand that. So of course you're going to be talking about yourself, but back to what I said about who's listening, always anchoring it to what the listener cares about. So this is a pretty broad set of steps, but at least gives you a sense of where to start. And again, I encourage you to do that self-discovery work between now and our next time that we get together. So I'm going to pop off here for a minute and just stop to say, are there any questions that I can take a couple of minutes to answer? If you've got a question, give us a thumbs up or raise your hand. And Jessica, I think we can probably take time for one question, maybe two, depending on what we get asked.
So if you feel comfortable speaking, you can raise your hand and then I will spotlight you, or else I guess just put it in the chat, right?
Mm-hmm. That'd be great.
Perfect. No questions yet, but it does look like there's a comment from Sean Domagal Goldman in the chat, and I can read that out loud.
Sure.
He says, huge support for that advice to reach out to references for these jobs and to convey what the employer is looking for. I can do a much better job as a letter writer when I know what potential employers are looking for.
Absolutely. And guess what? When we say yes to being your reference, we want you to get the job. I've helped a lot of people get the job by being a reference. And it's a very strategic communications opportunity for us as references to tell your story the way it needs to be told. So everything Sean said is really key. And that's part of what I meant when I said your communication skills have a lot to do with getting hired. It's your understanding of what your reference needs to know so that they can best tell your story. So thanks for that comment, Sean. Appreciate it. Okay. Now I want to talk about identifying roles. And the thing that I want you to think about here is that there are so many opportunities. I want to give you a taste of opportunities by sharing a look at this incredible buffet that I got to experience years ago at a conference in Trondheim. It just went on and on and on. I could have played you 2 minutes of video to show you everything there was to choose from. But I want to make the point, and it's kind of like the Kepler view of exoplanets. You probably have not been exposed to all the possibilities of jobs out in the world. There are so many, and new ones are being created. Industries are changing. The way we work is changing. There are jobs that probably have never been posted before that will be posted in the next several years. So, with that in mind, I want to take you on a quick tour of a couple of different job categories and some roles within those categories. And I thought I would start with biotech. And I chose biotech because I've done a lot of work in the biotech area, and drug development, compliance, clinical trials, and medical devices are major areas within the biotech industry that people work in. Having a role in a business development organization, or being part of a regulatory organization, or working for what's known in the acronym world, a CRO, a contract research organization. CROs are the companies that drug developers often go to. They outsource the clinical trial management process. And when you've got the background you do in science, you have an opportunity to apply your skills in all these different kinds of arenas. There are a lot of medical device companies out there, new inventions, better hips to replace our bodies as we age, right? There are all kinds of things being created. And when it comes to medical devices, quality is a big part of what's important in that work. And if you're somebody who pays a lot of attention to detail, wants to make sure things are done right, and wants to make a difference in the world, being part of drug development companies or medical device companies are places where you'll find that kind of purpose-driven work. And I want to talk a little bit about business development for a minute here, because a drug company can develop in-house. There's still opportunities to do bench research if that's something you'd like to continue to do in your career, and to develop drugs in-house. But they also do something called in-licensing, and that's where the business development folks come in. They're going to evaluate technology platforms or molecules being developed by other companies. There are deals made all the time in the biotech industry. And guess what? People who understand science can play a role in evaluating these deals. Is it a good idea to in-license? Is a question that your science background could help answer. So I just want you to appreciate there's so many different ways that the things you've learned and the skills you have as a result of the science that you know and love can turn into a future career. When it comes to medical devices, I would be remiss if I didn't tell you a little bit about Chang. He is a biomedical engineer with a master's degree. As part of his program, he attended the University of Melbourne. As part of his program, he took a course where they used design thinking, which is a method developed by folks at Stanford. There's a company called IDEO. You might find it fun to look them up and learn about design thinking. Design thinking is a process that helps you figure out what problem you're solving and how to solve it for the customers who need it. So Xing's company, Navi Medical Technologies, has developed its first product. It is a specialized catheter that's used when premature babies are born. And it solves a problem that physicians have today when they try to properly insert a catheter. I'm not going to tell you anything more. I'd like to invite you in the resources that you'll get a link to check out the interview I did with Xing, because he talks about Navi, talks about their product. He's a great person to follow on LinkedIn, so you can see a little bit more about what it's like when you're part of a startup company. Some of you might really enjoy startup life. And he's got a few interesting stories to tell, some of which are chronicled in this interview I'm referencing here. And I think you'll find it interesting to recognize, as he describes, how important your soft skills are to your career success. Let's talk about finance. Those of you who really enjoy math and analytical thinking. You can be involved in fund management, in venture capital, climate. There's finance connections to climate. I'll say more about that in a minute. Insurance. There's lots of different kinds of insurance. And some of the roles that you could play are analyst kinds of roles. Being an analyst who understands what's going on in a particular industry. Maybe you focus on the biotech industry, and you're helping to evaluate some of the newcomer companies, whether or not they're worthwhile investments. Technical analysts in venture capital firms do similar kind of work. They're helping to figure out, where should we put the money? Which of these companies are likely to meet a need? Those are all places where your science background can make you incredibly valuable. In the climate arena, part of the way we're dealing with getting carbon dioxide out of the air is through programs that incentivize and give carbon credit. So this is a whole new finance area that I can imagine many of you could really help in, because you have the skill sets. And I want to talk a minute about actuarial science, because that's an area that most people don't spend a lot of time thinking about, but there are opportunities for interesting careers there. And I went on LinkedIn to see if I could find an actuary, and I came upon Mary Yang. She works for a major HR firm. Aon Hewitt is a firm that does a lot of consulting in support of businesses on their HR policies and programs. And she's putting to use her actuarial skills in doing strategy work, in problem solving, in program implementation. And if you're somebody who could potentially have an interest in this area, she might be the kind of person to reach out to for an informational interview, because she's been at it for a while and she could talk to you about what her career was like. And all it took was just me typing an actuary into LinkedIn, and there she was. So the internet makes so much of this figuring out process, this research process, so much easier than it ever was when I was getting started. And let's talk a little bit about government. Given everything going on with COVID, there's been such a spotlight on public health, clearly an area that needs smart people, capable people who can help drive good decisions, who can help inform good decisions. The national laboratories are hiring. My husband Roger and I were talking about the technology evaluator role, and he was saying that, that requires somebody who's done research, who knows the kind of questions to ask, who knows how to think about what additional information do we want to have so that we can figure out, is this a promising technology? Is it worth investment? Is it worth going to the Department of Energy and asking for funding? Is it something they think they will need? So that's a role that the skills you have could enable you to play. And I know some of you expressed an interest in science policy, another great area. I think there's more recognition now than ever that we need science to inform policy decisions. So there are lots of ways you can get involved in doing that. Legislative analyst is a title that you might find to help you investigate careers in the science policy area. And I want to take a minute and introduce you to Adriana Bankston. She and I met because I'm an advisor to the STEM Advocacy Institute, and she recently at one of their symposiums gave a great talk. What she's explaining in the talk is how to get involved in science policy work. Again, you'll find references to her. There's a resource page on policy, and there's several links, one to the talk that I'm referencing here, but also to an organization she's part of. And I don't know much about it, but they have created some kind of certification program for people that want to get into science policy. So if that's an area that you want to explore, there's a whole page of resources that will take you deeper into understanding what the smorgasbord of opportunities is there too. So we've talked about biotech, we've talked about government, we've talked about finance. I also want to spend a little bit of time on business. Every company cares about workforce development, helping their people be better at their jobs. And so for those of you who found teaching interesting, perhaps a career that takes you into curriculum design is worth checking out. Perhaps a career that involves thinking about what people need to learn. Maybe not necessarily designing the curriculum, but recognizing what are the skills. You know, I mentioned problem solving before. I think when you're trained as a scientist, you get a rigorous way of looking at problems. And business needs that rigor. And they need people who can help teach about that rigor. So, workforce development is a whole area with a lot of different offshoots, different kinds of salmon, back to my buffet analogy here. Getting involved in consulting. There are a lot of consulting businesses out there. Consultants love to hire super smart, capable people. One area where a lot of PhDs have found opportunity is in user experience design because it requires research and it requires thinking about the problem you're solving and the experience you want your user to have along the way. So that's an area where there's a lot of job opportunity and an interesting one to investigate. Governance is another broad category. Industries are regulated. Businesses have to follow certain rules. And in many businesses, the health and safety of their employees, as well as the broader environmental question, is a part of the workforce. I've worked with my share of EH&S leaders who've needed to have programs to inspire people to follow the rules. And people in those roles who've been involved in making decisions about what kind of refrigeration system to bring in and what are the safety issues around ammonia. Project I got to do as part of some work at Genentech. So environmental health and safety could be a direction to go in with your skills and your interests. And last but not least, I want to talk about sustainability. I really know from the conversations I get to have at my dinner table with my husband that this is a huge new area. A lot of job opportunities exist there. And I want to introduce you to Stephanie Karras. She is a chemical engineer who has gone to work for a company called Carbon Direct. It's a startup. And her advice is really, really valuable advice. Be flexible and open, and don't be afraid to invent your own path. Your skills and how you choose to apply them could mean creating a job that's really tailor-made for what you're good at. That's a possibility when it comes to career exploration. Know that that's a possibility. And she's calling herself a carbon technology strategist. And I want to share a little bit of information that she was kind enough to give me about Carbon Direct. So this is a new organization combining scientific expertise and financial capital to scale a new global industry to get carbon out of our environment. And these are the degrees and the job titles for roles at her new company. They're a startup. They've gone for super smart PhD level people in many of the disciplines that I know you have. The other thing I want you to know about sustainability is that there are career paths for advancement. And you might be wondering, why M&Ms? Because this job was being offered by Mars, the candy maker. And if you look up sustainability jobs, you will find lots of different companies have that role. Microsoft has a huge sustainability organization. They're doing some leading edge work. Rodan and Fields, a company that makes skincare products. I saw a job posting recently from them for somebody in the sustainability arena. So, growth area for sure, certainly dovetails well with some of the science skills that I know many of you have. And if you can help solve the climate problem, you can be quite heroic. So, I invite you to think about the sustainability industry as one of the areas that you consider in your career search. So, how do you find the right role? What is it going to take? Again, it's part of that self exploration. And here are a couple of key questions to answer. What makes you lose track of time? What do you love doing so much that absorbs your attention? And the flip side of that, what do you hope you never have to do again? Like if I never had to touch that again, to pay attention to that again, to read about that again, I would be much happier. These are two questions that I'd like you to reflect on when you go through the handout materials, because these questions begin to give you insight into what's important to you. Now I'd like to ask you to sort of stop and think about everything I've covered so far today. I've talked about the 4 parts of the preparation process. I've given you a glimpse of some of the kinds of jobs that are out there and a way to think about it, that there are categories and that there are roles and positions that relate to those categories. So I'd like you to reflect and kind of recap in your own mind and pick one thing you learned that you want to remember. And I'd like to ask everyone to post something in the chat, because that chat will enable everybody who watches this webinar in the future and all of you who go back to watching it to have a list of some of the key takeaways that were meaningful for you. So I want to give you a minute to consider that question and to post something in the chat. And in the interest of time, we're not going to read it out, but I'd like to ask you to spend a minute to get something meaningful posted that you want to remember and that other people are likely to want to remember as well. Yes, it's so important to reflect on your actual skills. Diversity of roles, yes. For those of you who have not spent a lot of time on LinkedIn, just putting in different categories and topics can open your eyes to things you don't know anything about. So if you're ever bored and thinking about how to spend some time, doing some searches there can open doors that you didn't even imagine. Great. All really important takeaways to reinforce and to keep in mind. And I think there will be more and more opportunity to create your own path in the future, because we will have new problems to solve. You think about the use of robots. What's that going to mean? How are companies going to incorporate robots? That's a whole new area that's going to need smart people figuring out how to do that, how to do it in a way that's thoughtful. I can imagine many of you could make a real impact in those areas if it's an area of interest to you. So thank you all for mentioning some things in the chat here. I want to move on now because I'm really fixated on the notion of fulfillment, right? That is the anchor theme to this course. How do you find fulfillment? Like, what does it take to really figure out what you're going to love, and what you're good at. And here are two questions that are important for you to think about. And it's not just that you liked being a mentor or that you liked teaching or that you liked doing research. You want to dig deeper to really figure out what is it about doing research or being a mentor that inspired you? Is it the moment when you're in front of the class and you're teaching that you see people's eyes light up because they get it? Is it that moment that you know you've shared knowledge and information and it's going to make a difference for somebody who's learning from you? Is that where your fulfillment comes from? Is that what's really behind what inspires you? And the reason that this is such an important exercise to go through and consider is that this is how you find what you're really going to love doing, is thinking about why you love that, why it's inspiring to you. So I want to introduce you to a communications technique. It's used in lots of different ways, but it's the 5 whys. It's continuing to ask why, until you get to that deeper understanding. And I've been asking myself that as I found that I was less inclined to want to do my consulting work that I've done for so many years and more interested in being involved in helping young STEM professionals. I kept asking, what is it about? Why? Why do I want to do it? And one of my answers was because communication skills are important and I want people to learn them. And another answer, my deeper why, was because I love helping people succeed. And having that insight has really helped me figure out how to take this part of my career forward. So, this why exercise is really important. So, here's what we'd like to do next. We want to take 5 minutes and put you into breakout groups, and I'll explain this for you. You're going to have an opportunity to partner up with just one other person, tell them your name and where you're affiliated, and then just pick one thing that you enjoyed most from your STEM experience and tell your partner that one thing. Then you're going to work through the why process and ask yourself a question. Or are people dropping off because they don't want to be in breakout groups? I get the sense that we're losing some folks here. Just Jessica, I can't hear you.
Yep, I'm moving people around. Some rooms might have 3 people in them.
Okay, that's fine. So we're going to ask you to, in a moment when we break into these rooms, have you moved people yet, or you're preparing to?
I am ready to go when you are.
Okay, so I'd like to ask you to just take your phone and grab a snapshot of these instructions for your breakout conversations so you know what to expect. It's a quick hello, picking one thing, and then having your partner go through the why questions with you so you can try to get a deeper understanding of what it is about that you find fulfilling. And then we're going to come back together. We're not going to ask you to talk about your experience, but we would like to give you the opportunity to play around with this concept. You'll have 2 minutes each, and then we'll automatically bring you back in. So with that, go ahead and let people get together in their breakout rooms, please. Yeah, it's really fulfilling when you have that kind of success. It's tremendously fulfilling.
Yeah.
All
Well,
right, we have everybody back now.
great. As people come back, I hope you found that exercise worthwhile to get you thinking about how to take that deeper look and identify the places where your fulfillment will come through.
Truly and is really
So glad that you could participate in that. So as we turn the corner for the last half an hour roughly of this session, I want to get moving again. I want to tee up 4 questions. We're not going to spend time discussing them now, but I want you to know that these are part of the material you have. One of the most important fulfillment questions is this: what problems in the world do you want to help solve? Because finding companies who are working on those things is a key step in figuring out where to do your research. Figuring out what it's going to take for you to be fulfilled. What are the must-haves? What kind of work environment do you want to be part of? Where do you want to live? Those are all things that matter. And what can you tolerate? Because I don't know any job that doesn't have some piece of it that isn't going to be your favorite thing to do. We almost always have to put up with a little something. So just getting clear on what that is can help you get it right. And that's what we're about here, is trying to find those fulfilling roles. And then the last question is really a jumping off point for me to talk about culture. And it's this: what do you need in order to do your best work? From the people you work with, from the person who manages you, from your work environment. Like, some people can't work in a cubicle space. They just can't. They need quiet. Like, if you know you need a quiet space, that's really important. You're not going to be fulfilled if you settle for a cubicle. I got news for you. It can make a big difference. And culture really matters. And this is where I think some of my experience can really be helpful guidance for you as you figure out what companies you might like to work for. A big part of the work that I've been doing in my consulting role for probably the last 7 or 8 years has been helping organizations build success cultures. So I work a lot with leaders. We get very intentional about what kind of workplace are we creating. Companies that pay attention to culture, that don't let it happen by accident, but are intentional about it, are better places to work. And I can tell you right now, there are companies who claim that they care about culture, and there are companies who really do care about culture. And some of the ones who plaster all over their website, "People are our greatest assets," don't always really care about culture. So make sure you do enough research to dig in. Don't believe what you see written on a website, because we all know the story that people want to hear, and it's not always the true story. So let's talk a little bit about that. How can you tell if you have found a place with a healthy culture? There is something called the Great Places to Work recognition. There's an organization. And just because you see a place has been certified as a great place to work doesn't mean they haven't gamed the system. So it means they care about that. It means they want to be known as a great place to work. But again, use your research skills to dig deep enough to really understand if it's true. So how do you know? You know when you can ask people who work at the company and try to understand if they feel like they have the information they need to do their jobs well. Are they kept well informed? Or do big things suddenly happen that they know nothing about, that impact them, and they've never heard about it before it happens? Companies with a healthy culture have leaders who care about the people who work for them and who value what you as their employee has to say. And if you're ever in a situation where you don't feel respected by the people you work with, you're not dealing with a healthy culture. The way decisions get made says a lot about culture. Companies with the healthiest cultures make decisions that take into account the impact on the people doing the work, the impact on the customer, and the impact on the people who invest in those companies. But if all they care about is the shareholder and they don't think about you who works there or the patient or the customer, it's probably not a place you want to go to work. Companies that are mission driven, that really try to do everything they can to accomplish their missions, tend to have healthier cultures. Companies that care about your emotional safety, that talk about things like transparency and authenticity. Those are 2 indicators of cultures where you get to be yourself and where people tell it like it is. Those are indicators of healthy cultures. And finally, the values are lived. They're not just put on a poster somewhere on a wall or listed. And I can tell you, I know many stories about companies who invest the time to articulate their culture, but then they don't train their managers to make sure that they're enabling that culture to thrive. So find out, does a company have stated values? Do people feel like they really live up to those values? Do they feel like their manager demonstrates those values and cultivates those values. Those are things you can ask about as you're going through an interview process. Those are things you can do research on so that you have an understanding. And in your packet of handouts, you'll see this list of 8 culture styles coming from some research that was published in Harvard Business Review. What I suggest you do is think about those 8 styles and ask yourselves which ones are most important to you. If I were going to pick a culture, what elements would I want it to have? We're not going to take time to dig into that right now, but it's in your materials. And it's important for you to think about that. Like, do you really want to be part of a learning organization where innovation is a driver for how people get work done? That's a certain kind of company, certain kind of culture. Guess what? You're allowed to make mistakes in a culture that's a learning organization, an innovative organization. And as scientists, you know the only way to succeed is to fail, right? So cultures that care about innovation can be really interesting ways to go places. And sometimes you get it right the first time. You don't have to fail. But failure and success do have an interrelationship. So anyway, another exercise to give you insight into the kind of company culture that might be right for you. What else do you have to do to find the right company? You have to decide where you're willing to live. Do you want to be in a city? Do you want to be in a particular state? Those are key questions to answer. How flexible do you want your work environment to be? And with COVID, more and more companies are enabling flexibility. Back when I was working in my corporate jobs, I got a chance to job share. I got some flexibility. I had to negotiate it. My colleague and I were the first people ever to job share at this company. So how much does flexibility matter to you? What about career growth potential? Does the company hire people from inside? Or are you more likely to get promoted into a bigger job if you're coming from outside the company? People practices overall. How do performance reviews get done? Is feedback something you get regularly from the people you work with, or do they save it all up for once a year and do it in some formal meeting that feels kind of meaningless? You want to understand how people are treated at the company, how they're recognized, how they're rewarded. That'll tell you a lot about the culture of the company and if it's a place that's going to be right for you. Pay and perks. What are the benefits? Genentech is a huge employer, and they really want you to spend as much time as you need to on the job, and they have an enormous list of perks, everything from the dry cleaner to the grab and go to the concierge service. You could literally ask for help to plan your child's birthday party if you needed it. And those are perks that they offer because they want to make it easy for their employees to feel like they can live all the parts of their lives and still meet their commitments at work. And they know, given that the science company they are, sometimes that means working extra hours where you just don't have enough time to do everything, like go to the dry cleaners. So your dry cleaning can be delivered to your desk for you. Tells you a lot about a company, tells you a lot about their culture and how they take care of their people. Another aspect of deciding about the company is risk. Is this a business that's stable? Have they gone through layoffs? Are they growing? Those are things you want to know. Startup companies can give you lots of opportunity to jump in and do cool things, but they're high risk. They don't always succeed, especially if they don't have a long runway of funding. So these are all important things to consider. This is one of the things that'll be in your handouts with notes that correspond to what I've just been saying. So when you go back to this, you'll have this list to use as a bit of a checklist when you're evaluating companies. So again, I want you to reflect on what can you do to find out about a culture of a company and where can you go to get those questions answered. Do a thumbs up or a yes if you're familiar with Glassdoor, if you've spent any time on Glassdoor. Okay. For those of you who have not become acquainted, it's a place where people post what it's like to work at a company. So you can get a lot of information, and it's a place where you can learn about company culture. Glassdoor. Okay. I want to make another really important point here. When it comes to pursuing a career, I want you to think big. I want you to go bold. I don't want you to short change yourself. And BOLD for me is an acronym. It's what you've done before. It's what you're capable of doing, what's an option for you. It's what you can learn to do, and it's what you desire, what you want to do. That's what BOLD is. It's thinking about all those pieces because that will guide you for applying for jobs. And I want to make sure you don't self-limit. And I want you to take a minute to just read this. My screen right now has just women up on it. So for all of us women, you don't have to have 100% of the qualifications. Don't shortchange yourself because you think you don't have what they're looking for. Put your hat in the ring. Go bold. And here's a company that can help match your skills to job opportunities. They started with a focus on life sciences, but they're expanding. Seismic. It was their job fair that I attended where I heard Stephen Chang say, I can't teach smarts. And this is a site that I recommend you check out to see if it's something that could be a useful tool for you. And I talked to them about their algorithm. I said, so what percent gets matched? And what they explained to me is that the employer lists the must-have skills, the nice-to-have skills, and they weight them. So it goes back to the earlier point. You don't have to have 100% of the skills to get an opportunity to interview. So don't forget that. Put your hat in the ring. The more you go for it, the more opportunity you create for yourself. My dad has a saying that I love to share with people because it's such a strange thing for a father to tell their kids. You won't get hit by a car unless you're out in the traffic. And I love that line. I remind myself of that all the time. You won't get hit by a car unless you're out in the traffic. Put yourself out there. So take another minute to reflect on what we've just talked about in terms of company culture, what's important, in terms of being bold as you go out into the market, job market. And if you would, as you did before, post something in the chat. And I'm looking at the clock and realizing that I need to keep moving. So I'm going to shift gears and talk about networking and informational interviewing. When it comes to networking, there will be a time when you get to go to events again and learning how to start a conversation with people who come up to you if you're doing a poster session or if you're wandering through a poster session. Learning how to connect with people who could be people that are important for you to continue to get to know happens when you ask a question like this. What was one of the most interesting things you've learned so far? And when you ask somebody that and they answer that, you get a sense of what matters to them. And you can see whether you're interested in what they're interested in. And that helps you begin to identify common ground. When you sit next to somebody in a seminar or a lecture, same sort of question. What brought you here today? What are you interested in? People have an easy time answering that question. Let's talk for a minute about social media. How many of you follow somebody that you think of as a thought leader in an area that you might want to work in? Raise your hand or give a thumbs up if you follow someone on social media who's in a job area, a career area of interest to you. Have you ever thought about that? It's a huge opportunity. As you go through that exploration process and identify some of those people, start to follow them. Maybe you'll want to comment now and again. And that will ultimately open the door for you to reach out to them in the future. So start thinking about career directions that you're interested in and doing some research to figure out who are the people you ought to pay attention to. I want to encourage you to reach out because people like me, like my husband, like many professionals I've known for years are super generous with their time. Alexandra reached out to me about a year ago, and she clearly had read about championing science. She knew that I was focused on helping scientists make a bigger impact. And when she wrote to me, she used those words. She got my attention. She told me by virtue of that, she'd done her homework. And I spent time with her. I introduced her to people in the biotech world. I helped her with her cover letter and resume. And we were total strangers before she went bold and chose to reach out to me. So I just want you to know, not everybody will say yes, but there are a lot of generous people out there who have been in your shoes and want to be helpful. So let's talk about informational interviews.
The key to a successful informational interview is curiosity. With sincere curiosity and good questions about your interviewee's life and experience, you gain insights into their successes and failures, how they got where they are, and what's important to them. Your curiosity will lead to an authentically engaged conversation.
So, informational interviews, they are conversations. They're conversations that you're leading, you're asking the questions, and you're doing a lot of listening. Dr. John Tam has graduated from Oxford. He's a sociology PhD. I really love his list of questions. You'll see this in your handouts, but I want to break them into pieces. One of the areas you want to ask about is the starting point. Where did somebody's career start? So how did you get into this line of work? If you could go back in time, what would you do differently? What advice would you give to somebody looking to get hired by a company like the one you work for? These are all really good starting point kinds of questions to use in an informational interview. Then you want to ask about the work itself. What are your favorite parts? Why is it enjoyable to you? What would you rather not do? People will almost always have an answer to that. And then instead of asking about a typical work day, ask about a work week, because a week gives you a more representative view of what the work is like. Career growth and culture related questions. How did you get to where you are? How did you make progress? How much time did each step take along the way? You want to begin to understand what the career trajectory is like. You want to understand, how does your current employer help you achieve your goals? You might be doing an informational interview with somebody who works for a company you're interested in. I wouldn't start there. I would start with friends of your parents and other people in your family and friends circle. Reach out to people who you have some connection with, who are professionals, and practice having an informational interview, conducting the conversation. Practice listening, practice taking notes, get comfortable with this idea of seeking information. And then one of John's questions, which really cemented my reason for sharing his list, is this one. I think it's brilliant. This is how you get to know other people in a company that you might want to work for. Is there someone else you admire in the company you might be willing to introduce me to for an informational interview? If you can do that in a company with 5 or 6 people, you now have some solid connections to continue to cultivate and potentially find out about job opportunities, because every one of those people that you've interviewed will know about you. But the point of the interview isn't for them to know about you. It's for you to learn about them. What they know is that you're interested, and that's what's important. Informational interviews are 20 minutes long. You are not asking for an hour of somebody's time. That's a lot to ask for. Now, if someone chooses to give you more time, that's great, but your job is to watch the clock. Your job is to say, we're coming up on 20 minutes. I so appreciate having your time today. I'd love to be able to follow up with you as I learn more about this. I'm sure I'll have some other questions. And sometimes people will say, oh, I don't have another call for another 40 minutes. Let's keep talking. Sometimes they'll appreciate that you are paying attention and they'll respect you for it. So 20 minutes matters. I'm going to quickly step through what it takes to request an informational interview and also share with you what that email request would look like. Say hello. Let somebody know how it is you've chosen them. Maybe someone's referred you to them. Maybe you read about them like Alexandra did about me. She contacted me because she knew the industry I was in and the work that I'd done. Very briefly tell somebody your name and that you're interested in a career in whatever area it is that they work in. ask for the 20 minutes. Let them know that you will value their time. And if you use an app like Calendly or some of the other tools that are out there to make it easy for people to click and set up a time with you, that makes it super easy for a busy person to schedule. I highly recommend that. And then let them know that you really look forward to hearing from them. Now, I want you to be prepared to not hear from people. That's what's going to happen. But if you do enough of these, you will get people to get back in touch with you. And it'll start the process of informational interviewing, which, like I said, is a key strategy to finding your way into the kind of job you want to do, to learning enough about it to be sure it's an area you want to focus on. And as you talk to people and you say things like, help me understand what I should read or what kind of conferences I ought to go to or who I should follow so I can learn more, you will begin to immerse yourself and get a better understanding of whether that career direction is really a good fit for you. You want to keep your subject line of your email pretty clear and straightforward so people can't miss what you're looking for. Informational interview request is just fine, or you can be a little bit more creative. And in your materials, I pose this question: how is an informational interview different from a job interview? And I've listed some answers. So it's important to understand what lines you shouldn't cross in an informational interview. Last but not least, show me the money. And thanks to the internet, there are lots of places where you can find out what you're likely to be paid for a specific kind of job. And here are 8 ways to do that. And I'll share just a couple quick views of the sort of information you'll find on PayScale. They do a lot of analysis for you. You'll see job paths and salary trends. I picked data analyst because I know many of you have developed that skill. This is an average figure across the United States, 61 grand a year. Indeed.com had a data scientist analysis. That title's a little different. You might think that they have some similar function. They probably do, but that title apparently pays more. Titles matter. One of my first bosses, who was a great mentor, kept changing my titles so he could pay me more. They matter. Here's a title that comes with a great salary if you're at all interested in being a medical science liaison. The role there is working on behalf of a company with a product, and you help provide information to doctors. You're not selling the product, but you're educating the medical community about the science and the potential benefits of products that your company offers. So the last thing I'd like to ask you to do as we wrap up today, and I know I've had you drinking a bit from the fire hose, but there's so much I wanted to cover. So the good news is you get to come back, you can watch this recording, you can refer back to the handouts. But I'd like you to think about what you're going to do between now and the next time we get together. One thing I absolutely want you to do is to chat with someone else you know who attended this workshop, because I think there's huge value in starting to have someone you can have these conversations with. And if it's not a colleague at work, find somebody in your social circle or in your family that you can chat with about careers. But then I'd like you to pick a number, or maybe a couple of numbers, or maybe it's items 1 through 4 of what you want to commit to doing between now and when we get back together on the 28th of September. And if you would please put in the chat which of these things you want to try to do. And you could pick number 2 and number 6, crafting an informational interview request. You could take that all the way to 7 and 8 if you're brave and you want to start experimenting with that, but pick a number and post it in the chat. I'd really like you to take what you've learned today and engage with it. Because the more you do, the more you put yourself out there and really start letting yourself consider all of the stuff we've talked about, the more prepared you're going to be to go out into the world to pursue a career. So I invite you to post your number, take some time to do what it is you said you're going to do. This list will be in the package of materials And I'm going to invite Jessica to post the link. And also, I believe all of you know how to get to Nexus, which will be the place that the recording will live, and the materials that we want to make available to you today will be kept up there as well if you don't end up pulling it off of the link in the chat. So I just want to thank you all for being part of our first PAWS workshop. And I'm inspired to know that you're making your way. You're starting to think about all of this because you bring tremendously valuable skills. And I look forward to helping you understand those skills a little more and figure out how you talk about them to help you find the right job that'll build your fulfilling career.